Evening sleuths, welcome to Marple at midnight, where the quietest village hides the loudest crimes. I'm your host, and tonight we unravel Miss Marple and the sinister killer in kid gloves, a strangled heiress, a monogrammed murder weapon, and a child's mitten soaked in secrets. Can you spot the killer before the final stitch? Subscribe now, tap that bell, so you never miss the twist. The gloves are coming off. Chapter 1. The glove that wasn't there. The charity fete at Gossington Hall had been Lady Bantry's crowning triumph until the scream. It sliced through the late afternoon chatter like a shard of ice, freezing the string quartet mid-note and sending a tray of Victoria sponges tumbling into the petunias. Miss Jane Marple, seated beneath the cedar with a cup of Earl Grey balanced on her knee, felt the sound travel the length of her spine. She set the cup down untouched. Something in the timbre of that cry, raw, disbelieving, told her the day had tilted off its axis. The scream belonged to Lady Bantry herself. She stood at the French doors of the drawing room, one gloved hand pressed to her mouth, the other pointing inward as if the parquet floor had sprouted fangs. A small knot of guests surged forward. Miss Marple followed at a measured pace, her sensible brogues crunching across the gravel path. She had learned long ago that haste muddied observation. Inside, the drawing room glowed amber in the westering sun. Persian rugs drank the light. A grandfather clock ticked with the smug certainty of inherited wealth. On the chaise longue, upholstered in rose damask that had once belonged to Lady Bantry's grandmother, lay a woman, or rather the idea of a woman, limbs arranged with the careless artistry of a dropped marionette, head lolling at an angle no living neck would tolerate. A single white kid glove, pristine as fresh cream, lay across her throat like a misplaced cravat. The monogram stitched in silver thread at the cuff read, D.B. Dolly Bantry. Lady Bantry's voice cracked. That's my glove. I lost the pair last Michaelmas, but I never. Colonel Bantry shouldered through the doorway, face the colour of rare steak. Good God, Dolly, who is she? The dead woman was a stranger to most. Mid-30s, ash-blonde hair escaping its chignon in artful disarray. A travelling dress of dove, grey silk, now marred by a darker bloom at the collar. No blood, only the faint purple bruising of strangulation beneath the glove's pressure. Her eyes, wide and glassy, reflected the chandelier in twin chandeliers of their own. Miss Marple knelt, heedless of her lavender wool skirt pooling on the rug. The glove was right-handed, the seam along the index finger reinforced with an almost invisible stiffness. Wax, perhaps, or something more sinister. She lifted it with the tip of her umbrella. Beneath, the skin showed a perfect oval of compression, no abrasion. The killer had used the glove itself as the ligature, pressing until the breath was gone, efficient, intimate. A young footman, Reggie, she remembered, fond of the scullery maid, hovered nearby, face the colour of curdled milk. I found her, ma'am. Thought she was resting. Then I saw the glove and... Reggie, Miss Marple said gently, did you touch anything? He shook his head so hard his cap slipped. Only the bell pull, miss, to summon help. Lady Bantry swayed. Arthur, the guests, someone must... Already seen to, the colonel barked. Sent the gardener for Dr. Haydock and the constable. Dolly, sit down before you faint. Miss Marple replaced the glove exactly as she'd found it. A calling card lay half-tucked beneath the chaise's tasseled cushion. Thick cream stock, the name Miss Clarissa Vale embossed in severe black letterpress. On the reverse, someone had scrawled in violet ink, ask about the child. Clarissa Vale. The name tugged at memory like a loose thread. 3 months ago, a letter to the Women's Institute Gazette, an inquiry about Bantry family history, signed C. Vale. Lady Bantry had dismissed it as a genealogical pest. Now the pest lay dead in her drawing room, wearing her glove. The French doors stood ajar. Beyond, the rose garden shimmered in heat haze, petals the colour of fresh bruises. Miss Marple stepped onto the terrace. A single footprint marred the dew-damp gravel, small, narrow, the heel of a court shoe no wider than a shilling. Beside it, a jasmine petal, bruised and fragrant, had been ground into the stone. She crouched, noting the direction, toward the old glove-maker's cottage at the estate's edge, shuttered since the war. Dr. Haydock arrived with the brisk efficiency of a man who had seen too many corpses. He confirmed death by strangulation, estimated time within the last hour. No defensive wounds, he muttered, peeling back an eyelid. Pupils pinpoint, curious, almost as if she'd been drugged first. Jasmine, Miss Marple murmured. The scent is overwhelming. Check her handkerchief. Haydock produced a square of lace from the victim's sleeve. The monogram CV was embroidered in the corner. The fabric reeked of jasmine so potent it made his eyes water. Essence of jasmine can mask other odors, he said. Digitalis, perhaps, or something more exotic. Constable Polk lumbered in, helmet under arm, notebook already smudged. Right then, no forced entry. Doors locked from inside till the footman opened them. Garden gate was unlatched. Anyone could have slipped through. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the mantelpiece. A silver-framed photograph showed Lady Bantry at her debutante ball, gloved hands raised in a waltz. The gloves in the picture were identical to the one on the corpse, right down to the reinforced seam. She moved closer. The left glove in the photo was missing its partner even then. A gap showed where it should have been. Lady Bantry, she called softly. When exactly did you lose the pair? Dolly Bantry's hands fluttered like trapped birds. Last September, the hunt ball. I left them on the piano, came back, only the left remained. Thought it a prank. The Colonel snorted. Prank? Someone's idea of a joke ends in murder? Miss Marple did not answer. She was studying the footprint again. The heel mark was deeper on the outer edge. Someone running, perhaps, or walking with a pronounced limp. She followed the trail to the garden gate, where the gravel gave way to lawn. Here the prints vanished into the grass, but a scrap of white kid leather caught on a rose thorn glinted like a tiny flag of surrender. Reggie the footman appeared, wringing his hands. Begging your pardon, miss, but cook says the scullery maid saw a lady in grey near the glove-maker's cottage not half an hour ago. Tall, she said, wearing a hat with a veil. Miss Marple straightened. And the left glove? Cook swears she saw it in the kitchen this morning, on the dresser, bold as brass. Then it was gone. The glove-maker's cottage loomed at the garden's end, its windows blind with ivy. Miss Marple approached, umbrella tapping a thoughtful rhythm. The door hung ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the ghosts of leather and lavender water. A workbench stood beneath a grimy skylight, strewn with awls and lasts. On it lay a single left-hand glove, mate to the one on the corpse, its palm slashed open as if by a desperate claw. She lifted it carefully. Inside the cuff, stitched in crimson silk, was a tiny pocket. From it tumbled a photograph, a baby in a christening gown, eyes dark as sloes. On the back, in the same violet ink, "Your father's bastard. Ask Dolly." The pieces clicked like beads on an abacus. Clarissa Vale had come to Gossington Hall, not as a guest, but as a claimant. The child in the photograph, conceived during one of Colonel Bantry's wartime leaves perhaps, stood to inherit if the truth were proven. The glove was both calling card and murder weapon, a message that Lady Bantry's past had returned to strangle her present. Miss Marple slipped the photograph into her cardigan pocket. Outside, the sun dipped behind the yew hedge, painting the sky the colour of spilled claret. Somewhere in the manor, a clock struck 6. The fed guests had been sent home with murmurs of food poisoning. The drawing room was sealed. The corpse lay in the ice house, awaiting the coroner. She paused at the garden gate. The jasmine petal had been joined by another, fresher, its edges still crisp. Someone had returned. Someone who knew the glove's twin was missing and where to find it. Miss Marple's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. The game, as they said in the village, was afoot, and the hunter wore kid gloves. Chapter 2. Jasmine on the midnight air. The storm arrived at 9:30 with the manners of a drunk uncle, thunder slamming doors, rain clawing at the windows like a cat denied entry. Miss Marple sat alone in Gossington Hall's library, the only room still lit. A single lamp pooled gold across the mahogany table where the glove-maker's ledger lay open like a gutted fish. She had borrowed it from the village stationer under the pretext of historical curiosity. The leather binding smelled of camphor and secrets. Outside, lightning strobed the rose garden into monochrome snapshots. The glove-maker's cottage, the slashed left glove now sealed in a biscuit tin, the jasmine hedge quivering as if it, too, had something to confess. Miss Marple turned another page. The ledger was meticulous. Orders for riding gauntlets, opera-length kid, a single pair of reinforced white gloves dated September 1923. The customer, Mrs. A. Bantry, Gossington Hall. The note in the margin, inked in faded violet, right-hand seam to conceal reservoir. Scent, jasmine absolute. She traced the words with a gloved finger. Reservoir. Not for perfume then. For something that could be pressed into skin and forgotten until the heart stuttered. The library door creaked. Lady Bantry drifted in, wrapper the colour of storm clouds, hair in steel curlers like a hedgehog in distress. Jane, you'll ruin your eyes. Come to bed. Miss Marple closed the ledger. Dolly, do you remember ordering gloves in 1923? Lady Bantry's laugh was brittle. I was 23. Everything was gloves and gossip. Why? Because someone has been wearing your past like a second skin. A gust rattled the French windows. Lady Bantry flinched. Clarissa Vale. She wasn't on the guest list. How did she get in? Through the glove-maker's gate, Miss Marple said. The latch is broken. Anyone familiar with the estate could slip through unseen. The question is why she came armed with your monogram. Lady Bantry sank into a wing chair. Arthur had indiscretions. Wartime. A nurse in Cairo. I burned the letters. But if there's a child... There is. Miss Marple produced the christening photograph. The baby's dark eyes stared up with uncanny steadiness. Clarissa brought proof. The glove was her invitation. Thunder rolled overhead like artillery. The lights flickered, steadied. Somewhere in the house a door slammed. Miss Marple stood. I must see the churchyard. At this hour, Lady Bantry's voice cracked. You'll catch your death. Death has already called, Miss Marple replied. I merely wished to see if it left a forwarding address. She donned her mackintosh and a sou'wester that made her resemble a determined mushroom. The Colonel's umbrella, black, funereal, completed the ensemble. Lady Bantry watched from the doorway, wringing her hands. Take Reggie, he knows the shortcuts. Reggie materialized as if summoned by maternal anxiety, lantern swinging. Together they ventured into the storm. The churchyard lay a quarter-mile beyond the estate wall, its yews bent double like mourners at a grave. Lightning revealed the iron gate hanging askew. Someone had forced it recently. Miss Marple's beam swept the headstones. Most were lichen-crusted, illegible. Then, a fresh mound near the east wall, earth still raw, no marker. A single jasmine petal lay atop it, sodden but intact. Reggie swallowed. "That's new, miss. Vicar said it was for an indigent last week, but the coffin was empty. Pauper's funeral, they said." Miss Marple knelt, heedless of the mud. The soil was loosely packed. A spade's edge had left a telltale curve. She pressed her umbrella tip into the earth. It sank easily, too easily. "Someone dug this tonight," she murmured, and filled it with something other than a corpse. A twig snapped behind them. Reggie swung the lantern. The beam caught a figure in a streaming oilskin, tall, veiled hat plastered to the skull. The stranger held a small trowel, earth clinging to the blade like dried blood. "Stop!" Reggie shouted, but the figure bolted, vanishing between the yews. Miss Marple noted the gait, long strides, left leg favouring the right, the limp from the rose garden footprint. They gave chase, boots slipping on wet grass. The churchyard gave way to the lane. The figure disappeared into the vicarage garden. By the time they reached the gate, only the scent of jasmine lingered, sharp as a slap. Back at Gossington Hall, soaked and triumphant, Miss Marple found the household in uproar. The vicar's niece, Miss Eleanor Preston, 19, pre-Raphaelite curls, eyes like a startled fawn, stood in the hall clutching a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. I had to confess," she stammered as Lady Bantry loomed like an avenging angel. "They're love letters from Captain Vale, Clarissa's brother. He was engaged to me secretly. Clarissa came to warn me off, said the family was cursed." Miss Marple took the letters. The ink was fresh, the paper modern. "Forged," she said gently. "See the watermark. 2024. Someone wanted you discredited, Eleanor, to keep you from noticing the real intruder." Eleanor's knees buckled. Reggie caught her elbow. "But who?" "The person who knew about the gloves," Miss Marple said, "and the empty grave." She led them to the glovemaker's cottage. The storm had stripped the ivy. Moonlight silvered the workbench. The slashed left glove was gone, replaced by a single jasmine bloom, its petals arranged in a perfect circle. Beneath it, a note in violet ink. "The right hand knows what the left denies." Lady Bantry gasped. "That's Arthur's handwriting from the war. He used violet ink when stationery was scarce." Miss Marple's mind raced. The Colonel had been in London all day, verifiable by telegram. Someone had access to his old letters, his ink, his past. Upstairs, the loft yielded more. A trapdoor in the ceiling opened to a crawl space thick with dust. Miss Marple climbed the rickety ladder, lantern raised. The beam caught a mannequin, headless, armless, dressed in a grey travelling suit identical to Clarissa Vale's. Pinned to the lapel, the missing left glove, now stained with fresh mud from the churchyard. Reggie whistled. "Someone's been playing dress-up with a corpse." "Not a corpse," Miss Marple corrected. "A decoy. Clarissa was killed elsewhere. The body in the drawing room was meant to be found quickly. Panic the household, scatter the guests. While we searched for a murderer among the living, the real killer prepared the next act." She descended, mind alight. The empty grave, the forged letters, the mannequin, all threads in a tapestry of misdirection. But one detail nagged: the jasmine. Too potent, too specific. Someone was cultivating it, distilling it, weaponizing it. In the cottage garden, the storm had flattened the jasmine hedge. Miss Marple parted the ruined blooms. Beneath, a glass cloche protected a single plant. Monk's hood, its blue flowers deadly as sin. Beside it, a tiny vial, half full of clear liquid, aconitine, the perfect paralytic to still a victim before the glove tightened. Footprints, small, healed, led from the cloche to the back door, the same limp, the same scent. Miss Marple corked the vial. "Tomorrow," she said, "we hold a glove fitting. Every woman in the village will try on replicas. The killer will come, drawn by the need to retrieve the evidence, and when she does—" She did not finish. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the cottage like a stage. For a heartbeat, Miss Marple saw a face at the window, pale, veiled, eyes wide with something between terror and triumph. Then darkness swallowed it. Back in the hall, the grandfather clock struck midnight. Lady Bantry poured brandy with shaking hands. "Jane, who is she?" Miss Marple sipped, thoughtful. Someone who learned to sew before she learned to hate. Someone who waited 40 years for the perfect fit. Outside, the storm began to ease. Rain softened to a whisper, as if the night itself were holding its breath for the morning's revelation. In the glove-maker's loft, the mannequin stood sentinel, left glove dangling like a noose. The right hand, the deadly hand, was still at large. And somewhere in the village, a woman trimmed jasmine by candlelight, rehearsing the lie that would be her undoing. Chapter 3. The left hand's confession. The glove-maker's loft smelled of tallow and old grief. Dawn crept through the skylight in reluctant slivers, revealing motes that drifted like ash from a burned letter. Miss Marple stood beneath the mannequin, the mud-stained left glove now bagged in brown paper at her side. The right glove, the murder weapon, lay sealed in the constable's evidence locker, but its absence felt like a missing tooth. The tongue kept probing the gap. She had not slept. Instead, she had spent the witching hours in the village records office, coaxing the night clerk with tea and flattery. The ledger had been a start. The parish baptismal rolls were the crescendo. Clarissa Vale, born 1890, spinster, no issue. But in 1924, a child, female, unnamed, registered to C. Vale, father unknown. The midwife's note, delivered in secrecy at the glove-maker's cottage, paid in kid gloves. Footsteps creaked on the ladder. Constable Park's helmet appeared first, then the rest of him, red-faced from the climb. "Morning, miss." Dr. Haydock's finished the post-mortem. Strangulation, yes, but trace aconitine in the blood, enough to paralyze the larynx. Victim couldn't scream. Miss Marple nodded. The glove was the garrote. The poison ensured silence. Park wiped his brow. "We've a suspect. The seamstress, Miss Agatha Threadwell, lives above the haberdashery. Found this in her bin." He produced a scrap of white kid, the mate to the slashed glove, needle holes still fresh. They descended to the cottage proper. The workbench now bore a new addition, a silver thimble engraved A.T. and a spool of crimson silk. Miss Marple lifted the thimble. Inside, a speck of dried wax. "The reservoir," she murmured. She reinforced the seam herself. The haberdashery bell jingled as they entered. Miss Threadwell, 60 of a day, steel spectacles, hands that trembled only when she wished them to, looked up from her cutting table. Bolts of velvet cascaded behind her like a theatrical backdrop. "Miss Marple, constable, to what do I owe this invasion?" Miss Marple placed the thimble on the counter. "To a child born in 1924 and a pair of gloves that should have stayed buried." Miss Threadwell's composure cracked like thin ice. She sank onto a stool, the tape measure around her neck slithering to the floor. "I made them for Clarissa. She was delicate, wanted a way to carry her heart medicine without a bottle. I stitched a wax capsule into the right seam, jasmine to mask the bitterness." Her voice dropped. "She paid me in silence. said the child was Colonel Bantry's. I never asked questions. Polk bristled. You admit crafting the murder weapon. I crafted a medical aid, Miss Threadwell snapped. The gloves were destroyed, or so I thought. Clarissa took them when she left for London. I burned the patterns. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the wall. Miss Threadwell, younger, arm in arm with a woman in a cloche hat. The woman's face was Clarissa Vale's, but softer, alive. On the back, in faded ink, sisters in thread and blood. You were her confidant, Miss Marple said, not just her seamstress. When Clarissa returned yesterday, did she come to you? Miss Threadwell's hands clenched. She came at dusk, said the child, her daughter, was dying, needed money for treatment. Threatened to expose the colonel unless Lady Bantry paid. I told her to leave it be. The past is a shroud, best left folded. But she didn't listen, Miss Marple prompted. She never did. Miss Threadwell's laugh was bitter. I gave her tea. Jasmine, like old times. She left the left glove on my table, said it was insurance. I thought she meant to return it. Then I heard the scream from the hall. Park stepped forward. You'll need to come with me, miss. Miss Threadwell stood, surprisingly steady. I'll come. But I didn't kill her. Check my shoes. Size 7, broad. The footprints in the rose garden were 5s. Miss Marple believed her. The limp, the jasmine, the precision of the kill, all pointed to someone younger, lighter, more vengeful. But Miss Threadwell had given her the final thread. The child was dying. The motive was no longer inheritance. It was desperation. They left the haberdashery. The village stirred. Milk carts clattered. The baker's boy whistled. Curtains twitched like guilty eyelids. Miss Marple paused at the war memorial. The names of the fallen marched in brass. Beneath, a fresh wreath of jasmine. No card. Someone's mourning, she said, or taunting. Back at Gossington Hall, the household assembled in the morning room. Lady Bantry, hollow-eyed, poured coffee with mechanical precision. Eleanor Preston nibbled toast, her engagement ring, a modest sapphire, flashing like a warning. Reggie hovered with a fresh pot. Miss Marple addressed them. Clarissa Vale had a daughter. The child is ill. Consumption, perhaps. Clarissa came not to claim the estate, but to beg for it. Someone silenced her before she could. Eleanor's cup rattled. Captain Vale, my fiancé. He mentioned a sister in London, said she was difficult. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Where is the captain now? London, Eleanor whispered. Business. He'll return tomorrow. The colonel entered, boots muddy from the stables. Found this in the tack room. He tossed a small leather case onto the table. Inside, a hypodermic syringe, a vial labeled aconitine 1.1000, and a pair of surgical gloves, latex, modern, size 5. Someone's been treating horses, the colonel growled, or planning to treat people. Miss Marple lifted the vial, half empty. The same poison, but the gloves are wrong. Latex leaves ridges. Our killer used kid. Lady Bantry's voice was a thread. Arthur, the child, if she's yours. Impossible, he blustered. I was in France in 23. Miss Marple produced the baptismal record. The midwife's note places the birth in this cottage. Someone lied about the dates. A crash from the hallway. Reggie dropped the coffee pot. Brown rivulets spreading like blood. Beg pardon, slipped. But miss, there's a lady at the kitchen door. Says she's from the sanatorium. About a patient named Vale. The woman was tall, veiled, voice muffled by gauze. My patient, Miss Vale's daughter, took a turn. She's asking for her mother. Said to bring this. She held out a child's mitten, knitted in white wool. Monogrammed CV. Miss Marple took it. Inside, A. Note in childish scrawl, Mamma said the gloves would make me better. Where is she? The veiled woman backed away. I must go, the ambulance. But Miss Marple was faster. She lifted the veil. Beneath, a face she did not know, but eyes she did. Dark, slow-like, the baby's eyes grown desperate. The woman bolted, but Park was waiting by the scullery. She fought like a cornered cat, nails raking his cheek, until the constable pinned her arms. Name, he demanded. Beatrice Vale, she spat. Clarissa was my aunt. The child is my sister. She's dying, and your precious bantries let her rot. Miss Marple's voice was gentle. You killed Clarissa to speed the inheritance. Beatrice laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I killed her to end the begging. She was weak, thought tears would move them. I took the gloves from Threadwell's bin, thought if Clarissa died wearing Dolly's monogram, they'd pay to hush it up. Lady Bantry swayed. How much? Enough for the sanatorium, enough to bury the shame. Beatrice's gaze flicked to the mitten. She knitted that for Mama, thought the gloves were magic. Park snapped cuffs on her wrists. You'll come quietly now. As they led her out, Miss Marple noticed the limp left leg, slight but unmistakable. The rose garden footprints, the churchyard chase, but the gloves. Beatrice wore none now. The right one was still missing. In the morning room, silence fell like snow. Eleanor wept quietly. The colonel stared at the syringe as if it might bite. Lady Bantry poured brandy with a steadier hand. Miss Marple slipped the mitten into her pocket. The child will need more than money, she said. She'll need the truth and someone to tell it gently. Outside, the jasmine hedge glistened with rain. The storm had passed, but the scent lingered, sharp, sweet, and deadly as ever. The left hand had confessed, but the right, the killing hand, still waited in the shadows, sewn into someone else's skin. Chapter 4. The killer's silhouette in silk. The village green had never looked so innocent. Dew sparkled on the grass like scattered diamonds. The maypole ribbons fluttered in a breeze that smelled of warm bread and distant wood smoke. Yet beneath the bunting and the bunting's lie, Gossington Hall's tragedy pulsed like a bruise. Miss Marple had decreed a glove fitting at noon, an invitation sent to every woman in St. Mary Mead who had ever worn kid leather. The pretext, a charity raffle for the sanatorium. The truth, a trap baited with vanity and fear. By 11, the marquee tent billowed white against the sky, its interior transformed into a makeshift salon. Tables draped in crisp linen displayed rows of replica gloves. White kid, size 5 to 7, each pair stitched with deliberate imperfection so the real ones would stand out. A gramophone spun a jaunty waltz. Ladies cued with the nervous excitement of debutantes. Miss Marple circulated with a smile, sharp as a dressmaker's pin, eyes cataloguing every tremor, every glance toward the exit. Lady Bantry, magnificent in morning lilac, greeted arrivals at the flap. For the children, she murmured, pressing a raffle ticket into each palm. Her voice held the brittle brightness of cracked porcelain. Eleanor Preston, ringless now, her engagement dissolved by telegram, stood beside her, cheeks flushed with the strain of pretending normalcy. At the far end, a velvet curtain concealed a smaller table. The evidence, the right-hand murder glove, returned from the police laboratory, lay under glass like a museum relic. Its seam glinted with residual wax. The faint jasmine scent had been neutralized with bicarbonate, but memory lingered. Beside it, the slashed left glove, the child's mitten, the aconitine vial. A placard read, "Historical curiosities, do not touch." The first hour passed in a rustle of silk and speculation. Mrs. Price Ridley tried on a size 6 and declared it pinchy. The doctor's wife admired the monogramming. Miss Threadwell, released on bail but under Pork's watchful eye, sat in a corner mending a torn cuff, her needle flashing like a trapped firefly. Then the atmosphere shifted, the way air thickens before lightning. A woman entered, tall, veiled in black lace, a traveling cloak of charcoal cashmere swirling like smoke. She moved against the crowd's current, every step deliberate. The veil obscured her face, but Miss Marple noted the posture, shoulders squared, left hand gloved in pristine white kid, right hand bare and clenched. "Madam," Lady Bantry began, "the raffle." The woman ignored her. She glided straight to the evidence table, lifted the glass dome with the confidence of ownership, and slipped the murder glove onto her bare hand. The fit was perfect. Gasps rippled outward. The gramophone needle scratched to silence. Miss Marple stepped forward. "Miss Greenshaw, I believe." The veil lifted. Miss Greenshaw, Lady Bantry's companion of 15 years, mousy, efficient, invisible, smiled with the serenity of a woman who has nothing left to lose. Her eyes were the colour of winter skies. Observant as ever, Miss Marple. Her voice was soft, cultured, lethal. I wondered how long it would take. Lady Bantry made a strangled sound. "Greenshaw, you." Miss Greenshaw flexed the gloved fingers. "You never noticed the limp, did you, Dolly? The war shrapnel in the calf. I learned to hide it, just as I learned to hide everything else." She turned to the crowd, voice rising like a preacher's. "Clarissa Vale was my half-sister. Same father, Colonel Bantry's brief indiscretion in Cairo. She got the beauty, I got the brains. When she came begging, I saw opportunity. The gloves were my design. Threadwell merely executed them. I kept the right one after Clarissa discarded the pair. A souvenir." Palk moved to intercept, but Miss Marple raised a hand. "Let her speak. The stage is hers." Miss Greenshaw's laugh was silk tearing. "Clarissa arrived yesterday morning, waving that christening photo like a battle standard. Threatened to expose the colonel unless you paid for the child's treatment. I met her in the rose garden, offered tea laced with aconitine. She drank, trusting as a lamb. When the paralysis set in, I used the glove. One squeeze, and the secret died with her." Eleanor Preston stepped forward, voice trembling. "But the child, Beatrice said she was dying." "A lie," Miss Greenshaw sneered. "Beatrice is Clarissa's maid, not her niece. I paid her to play the grieving sister, to plant the mitten, to dig the empty grave. Distractions. While you chased ghosts, I prepared the final act." She reached into her cloak and produced a second glove, left-handed, identical, but the palm bore a fresh crimson stain. This one held the syringe. "I planned to inject the colonel tonight. Heart failure, tragic but tidy. The estate would pass to Dolly, and I, loyal companion, would inherit through her revised will." Lady Bantry's face drained to ash. "You forged my signature." "Every month for a decade," Miss Greenshaw said. "You sign Christmas cards without reading them. Child's play." The marquee had gone deathly still. Outside, a cloud crossed the sun. Shadows pooled like spilled ink. Miss Marple's voice cut through the hush. "You overlooked the jasmine, Miss Greenshaw. The cloche in the cottage garden, your private still room, distilling essence to mask the poison, but jasmine wilts in captivity. The petals you scattered were greenhouse-forced, veins too pale, scent too sharp. A botanist would notice, so would I." Miss Greenshaw's composure flickered. "Details. Details are the stitches that hold truth together." Miss Marple produced a small envelope. "This arrived by postboy an hour ago, from the sanatorium. The child, Your niece, actually, recovered weeks ago, sent home to her grandmother in Devon. Beatrice confessed everything for a reduced sentence. She never dug a grave. She only scattered petals on your instructions. Miss Greenshaw's gloved hand twitched. You can't prove. I can, Miss Marple signaled. Reggie emerged from behind the curtain holding a silver hatpin, long, wicked, engraved with the initials MG. Found in your dressing table, Miss Greenshaw, the pin that held the left glove to the maypole last night. Your monogram, your blood type on the tip, you pricked yourself in haste. The companion's facade shattered. She lunged for the evidence table, seizing the aconitine vial. Pulk was faster. He twisted her arm until the glass shattered on the grass, clear liquid soaking into the earth like absolution. She fought, wild, feral, until the constable subdued her with cuffs that gleamed like justice. Lady Bantry found her voice. Why, Greenshaw, I trusted you. Miss Greenshaw sagged, veil askew, revealing a face etched with years of swallowed rage. You had everything, title, home, love. I had scraps. The colonel's bastard raised as a charity case, taught to curtsy and disappear. When Clarissa came, I saw my chance to take it all. Miss Marple's tone was almost tender. You took a life instead, and lost your own. As Pork led her away, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Sunlight returned, gilding the maypole ribbons in mocking brightness. The gramophone, nudged by a breeze, began to play again. A slow, mournful foxtrot. Lady Bantry approached Miss Marple, eyes wet. The will, can it be undone? Already in motion, Miss Marple said. The colonel's solicitors are drawing up a trust for the child. Legitimate or not, she is family. And you, Dolly, will administer it with the grace you were born to. Eleanor touched the child's mitten, still in Miss Marple's pocket. Will she forgive us? Children forgive what adults cannot, Miss Marple replied. Give her time and Jasmine in summer. The raffle resumed, subdued but determined. Gloves were tried, tickets drawn, prizes awarded, a silver teapot, a hand-painted fan, a voucher for the haberdashery. Miss Threadwell won the teapot. She accepted it with a nod that might have been gratitude. By 4 o'clock, the tent emptied. The evidence table was cleared. The murder glove destined for an incinerator. Miss Marple lingered, watching workers dismantle the maypole. The ribbons came down in tangled heaps, scarlet, gold, white, like the unravelled threads of a life. Lady Bantry joined her. Will you stay for dinner, Jane? Cook's doing roast pheasant. Miss Marple smiled. Another time. The 4:15 bus waits for no sleuth. As she walked the gravel path to the gate, the jasmine hedge released a final, defiant breath of scent. She paused, inhaling. Somewhere in Devon, a little girl would wake to ordinary mornings, unaware her future had been stitched together by a stranger's mercy. The killer's silhouette, once elegant, now diminished, faded into the police van. The right hand, gloved in infamy, would trouble Gossington Hall no more, and the left, slashed and stained, lay folded in an evidence box, a warning and a relic. Miss Marple boarded the bus, settled beside a window streaked with rain's memory. The village receded, church spire, war memorial, the glovemaker's cottage with its blind windows. She took up her knitting, needles clicking a gentle requiem. Human frailty, she reflected, was a fabric full of flaws, but mend it with truth, and even the ugliest tear could become a seam of strength. The bus lurched forward. Behind it, Gossington Hall stood bathed in afternoon light, its shadows banished, its gloves, finally, mercifully, laid to rest. Chapter 5. The Right Hand of Justice. The grand staircase of Gossington Hall gleamed like polished amber in the late afternoon sun, its banister carved with acanthus leaves that seemed to curl in anticipation. Miss Marple stood at the foot, a small figure in dove-grey tweed, her knitting bag slung over one arm like a reticule of secrets. Above her, the landing window poured light in a cascade of gold, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny witnesses to the drama about to unfold. She had summoned them all to the first-floor gallery, a long, portrait-lined corridor where Bantry ancestors glowered down in oils and disapproval. Lady Bantry waited by the window, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. The colonel paced, boots thudding on the runner like muffled drum beats. Eleanor Preston sat on a velvet bench, twisting a handkerchief into knots. Miss Threadwell, free but shadowed by Constable Pork, stood apart, her thimble glinting as she worried it like a rosary. Reggie, the footman, hovered with a tray of untouched sherry glasses, his eyes wide as saucers. Miss Marple's voice, when it came, was soft, but carried the weight of a gavel. The gloves have told their story. Now it is time for the hands that wore them to speak the truth. She placed the evidence on a marquetry table. The right-hand murder glove, its seam still faintly waxy. The slashed left glove, muddied and forlorn. The child's mitten, wool soft as a lamb's ear. The shattered aconitine vial, its remnants sealed in a jar. And the silver hatpin, its tip dark with Miss Greenshaw's blood. Beside them lay a single jasmine bloom, its petals beginning to brown at the edges. Clarissa Vale died because she carried a secret, Miss Marple began. A child, born in 1924, fathered by Colonel Bantry during a wartime leave. Clarissa raised the girl, named Lily, in London, scraping by on sewing and shame. When Lily fell ill with tuberculosis, Clarissa came here not for vengeance, but for salvation. She believed the Bantry's wealth could buy her daughter's life. Lady Bantry's breath hitched. We would have helped. Would you? Miss Marple's tone was gentle but unyielding. Clarissa tried letters, please, even the christening photograph, all ignored. So she came in person, wearing your glove as a calling card. A mistake. It made her a target. The colonel stopped pacing. Greenshaw confessed in the marquee. She planned it all. Poison, glove, forged will. Case closed. Miss Marple shook her head. Miss Greenshaw confessed to ambition, yes. To forging documents, planting distractions, even wielding the hatpin. But not to murder. The timing is wrong. Clarissa was seen alive at 3 o'clock by the gardener, entering the rose garden alone. Miss Greenshaw was in the village, posting letters, witnessed by the postmistress. She returned at 4, after the scream. Eleanor's voice was a whisper. Then who? Miss Marple lifted the child's mitten. Lily knitted this for her mother. The stitches are uneven. Child's work, but the wool is expensive. Cashmere. Clarissa could never afford it. Someone gave it to her. Someone who knew the glove's history and wanted Clarissa silenced before she reached the hall. She turned to Miss Threadwell. You told us Clarissa visited you at dusk, left the left glove as insurance. But you burned the patterns, you said. Yet the murder glove's seam is identical to the 1923 order. Wax capsule, jasmine reservoir. Only one person had access to both the original pattern and the aconitine. Miss Threadwell's thimble slipped from her fingers, clinking on the parquet. I was coerced. She threatened to ruin me. Who? Lady Bantry demanded. Miss Marple's gaze settled on Reggie. The footman froze, tray tilting. A sherry glass slid and shattered, amber liquid pooling like liquid topaz. Reggie, Miss Marple said, almost kindly. You served tea in the rose garden yesterday. You told cook you saw no one. But the gardener saw you carrying a tray for two. Clarissa drank from a cup you handed her. The aconitine was in the sugar. Crystals dissolved slowly, giving you time to slip away. Reggie's face crumpled. It wasn't meant to kill her, just make her sleep so Miss Greenshaw could scare her off. She said Clarissa was a fraud, that the child wasn't real. I believed her. I needed the money. My sister's in the hospital, same as Lily. Enough. Polk stepped forward, but Miss Marple raised a hand. Let him finish, she said. The truth is a balm, even when it stings. Reggie's voice broke. Miss Greenshaw gave me the glove, the right one. Said to press it to Clarissa's throat if she woke too soon. I couldn't. She looked so peaceful, like my own mum. I panicked, ran, left the glove on her neck to make it look like suicide. Then I planted the left one in the cottage like Miss Greenshaw told me. The Colonel's face was thunder. You little... Arthur. Lady Bantry's voice cut like steel. He's a boy. Greenshaw used him. Miss Marple nodded. Miss Greenshaw orchestrated the distractions, the forged letters, the mannequin, the jasmine petals. She wanted the estate, yes, but she needed a scapegoat. Reggie was perfect, loyal, desperate, invisible. When Clarissa died too cleanly, Greenshaw improvised, pinning the left glove to the maypole to frame herself as the mastermind, knowing her alibi was ironclad, a double bluff. Eleanor stood, eyes blazing. And the child, was Lily real? Very real, Miss Marple said. I telephoned the sanatorium this morning. Lily Vale, age 7, discharged yesterday to her grandmother's care in Torquay. The cashmere mitten was a gift from Clarissa's landlady, not Reggie. He lied to protect his own sister. She produced a telegram from her bag. From the landlady. Lily is safe, unaware of her mother's fate. The Bantry's trust will see her educated, cared for. A legacy Clarissa never dreamed of. Lady Bantry's tears fell unchecked. We'll do right by her, Jane. I swear it. Miss Marple turned to Reggie. You will confess fully to Constable Polk. Your sister's treatment will be paid from the estate, quietly. Youth is not absolution, but it is a beginning. Reggie nodded, sobbing. Polk led him away, the broken glass crunching underfoot like fallen dreams. The gallery felt suddenly larger, the portraits less judgmental. Sunlight shifted, gilding the jasmine bloom on the table. Miss Marple lifted it, twirled it between her fingers. Jasmine, she said, is a flower of contradictions, fragrant by night, scentless by day, a symbol of love in some cultures, mourning in others. Clarissa wore it for hope. Miss Greenshaw weaponized it for greed. Reggie scattered it in panic. And Lily will smell it in Torquay Gardens and think of her mother's embrace. She placed the bloom in Lady Bantry's hand. Plant it in the rose garden, Dolly. Let it grow wild. A reminder that even poison can become perfume in the right soil. The Colonel cleared his throat. What of Greenshaw? Charged with conspiracy and fraud, Miss Marple said. Her confession in the Marquis was theatre, bravado to shield Reggie. She'll face justice, but not the gallows. The noose was never hers to wear. Miss Threadwell spoke for the first time, voice steady. I'll testify, for Clarissa, for the child I helped bring into the world. Miss Marple smiled. Redemption is a stitch at a time, Agatha. Evening settled over Gossington Hall, soft as a cashmere shawl. The household dined quietly. Pheasant, yes, but with a new gravity. Eleanor announced her intention to train as a nurse, to honour Lily's recovery. The Colonel poured port with a steadier hand, promising to visit Torquay himself. Lady Bantry wrote a letter to the grandmother, sealing it with wax and tears. Miss Marple slipped away before pudding. The 4:15 bus had long gone, but the Colonel's chauffeur drove her to the station, under a sky streaked with rose and violet. She carried no knitting now, only the child's mitten tucked into her pocket like a talisman. At the platform, steam hissed like a satisfied cat. The train to St. Mary Mead waited, windows glowing. Miss Marple boarded, settled by the window, and watched Gossington Hall recede into twilight. The jasmine hedge was a dark smudge against the lawn, but she knew come summer it would blaze white, defiant. Human hands, she reflected, were capable of terrible precision, whether stitching a glove, pouring poison, or cradling a child's future. The right hand had killed, the left had confessed, but both, in the end, had been guided to justice by threads finer than silk. The train lurched forward. Somewhere ahead, her cottage waited, geraniums on the sill, a kettle on the hob, a quiet life stitched with ordinary miracles. Behind her, a village healed, a child breathed free, and a pair of gloves, white kid, monogrammed, forever stained, lay in an evidence box, their story told. Miss Marple closed her eyes. The wheels sang a lullaby of steel and steam, carrying her home to St. Mary Mead, where the next mystery, like the next blossom, was already waiting to unfurl.